Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for Eirdu, Carrier of Dawn, as our commander. This 5 mana 5/5 elemental god has flying and lifelink and says creature spells we cast have convoke, so we can now tap our creatures to help cast them. And at the beginning of our first main phase we can pay a black mana to transform Eirdu into Isilu, Carrier of Twilight. Still has the same stats, so still a 5/5 with flying and lifelink, but now instead of convoking it says each other non-token creature we control has persist. So if a creature without a -1/-1 counter were about to die, it comes back from the graveyard with a -1/-1 counter on it. So this can be very effective if we have a way of sacrificing our own creatures, so we can keep getting them back, maybe re-triggering some enter the battlefield abilities, maybe draining the opponent in the process. And there's a few ways to offset those -1 counters with +1 counters, and that's how we can potentially set up some infinite combos to just drain the opponent out on the spot. So we're mostly interested in keeping the Isilu side on the battlefield, but we could decide to once again pay a white mana this time at the beginning of our first main phase to transform it back into Eirdu. So then taking a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with a bunch of mana acceleration, since we are trying to cast a 5 mana commander, which is pretty pricey in this day and age. Then we also have some removal, some cheap, efficient instant speed removal, as well as some creatures that can remove stuff when they enter the battlefield, so then if we maybe persist them back later, they can once again take something out. Then we've got multiple card draw engines that will usually trigger whenever a creature dies, as well as some other card draw effects. And then we've got ways to close out the game, which usually involve draining the opponent for 1 and gaining 1 life whenever one of our creatures dies, or maybe even the opponent's creatures die. So those can be very effective when combined with our persist effects, and especially if we have all the other missing combo pieces in place, we can very quickly whittle away at the opponent's life total. And then we've got our infinite sacrifice outlet. By infinite sacrifice outlet, I mean a way to sacrifice our creatures that doesn't require any major cost outside of maybe paying a life, so we can repeatedly keep activating them over and over, and then with the remaining combo pieces immediately win the game on the spot. And then we've got our enablers, which can potentially offset the -1/-1 counters from persist. So these include effects that just negate the -1 counter, like the Vizier of Remedies, as well as ways to get additional +1 counters that can also offset the -1 counter, because if you put a +1 counter on a creature that has a -1 counter on it, they cancel each other out, and we're left with a creature without any counters on it whatsoever. So that's also a way we can keep sacrificing that same creature with persist, and then cancel out a -1 counter, so we can keep doing it over and over with our sacrifice outlet while maybe draining the opponent out. Then we've got our protection section, which includes a few creatures that can maybe sacrifice themselves to make something indestructible, or tap to give protection from a specific color, so these can also help protect our key combo pieces, such as our commander, and by sacrificing the creature, it can also maybe return with persist, so there's additional synergy there too. And then last but not least, we've got a small miscellaneous section with mostly token makers and other ways we can potentially leverage all these sacrifice synergies. So that's our deck in a nutshell. And now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. Dark Ritual can potentially help play our commander ahead of schedule. There's also plenty of other powerful 3-drops we could now play on turn 1. And then we've got some 1-drops that can leave a treasure token behind when they die, so we're also happy to sacrifice these early on. And then we've got some 2 mana ramp artifacts, with the Terminus being indestructible, can also maybe harness it later to recur our creatures from the graveyard. We've got Ords of Signet, the Black-White Talisman, Arcane Signet, of course the best one, as well as Mind Stone and the Iron Crag, which at least enter untapped, and then Worn Power Stone enters tapped but can make 2 colorless mana for 3, so that's another nice way to get ahead of mana. And then the Solemn Simulacrum, also a nice one to potentially sacrifice and persist back, as it triggers both when it enters and when it dies, giving us an extra land, potentially drawing a card. And then there's also Lotho, which rewards us for double spelling, and if the opponent does the same, we also get to make additional treasure tokens at the cost of 1 life. Then we've got a removal, starting with the classics, Swords to Plowshares in white, Fatal Push in black, plenty of ways to enable Revolt in this deck. The Accursed Marauder is also a nice one, especially with Persist, as it will come back an additional time to make each player sacrifice a non-token creature. Of course, if it persists back, it will immediately die, so then we have to sacrifice something else to its ability, but that can still be worth it. We've got Aloran to deal with artifacts and enchantments, Skyclave Apparition to exile any non-land with mana value 4 or less. There's a Grief to potentially give us a discard effect, and both Grief and Solitude we can also evoke by pitching a card of the corresponding color, and evoking a creature is also very effective if we have Isilu in play to persist them back, since then they'll re-enter, triggering their abilities once again right away. And then Ravenous Chupacabra can also take out an opposing creature when it enters. Then we've got our card draw effects, with Esper Sentinel taxing the opponent when casting non-creature spells, otherwise we get to draw. Black Market Connections can give us additional treasure to help ramp, but can also make shapeshifters if we need some sacrifice fodder or just draw additional cards at the cost of life. And we've got a lot of ways to offset the life loss from connections. Then a Grim Haruspex will draw a card whenever another non-token creature we control dies, whereas Midnight Reaper also includes itself, but will cost us 1 life each time. Morbid Opportunist also includes opposing creatures dying, but is limited to once per turn, and Relax is closer to the Grim Haruspex. A 2/3 with Flash and Menace is slightly better stat, but will also cost us 1 life each time. And then Sephiroth will trigger when it enters or when it attacks, making us sacrifice a creature to draw a card. Can also maybe transform into the 1-winged angel, so this can also double up as a win condition, so it can potentially drain the opponent out. And those also include the classic Blood Artist, which also triggers off opposing creatures dying. Marionette Apprentice comes with a servo token or with a +1 counter, and that can actually be relevant because entering with a Fabricate +1/+1 counter can help offset the -1 counter from persist. So if we have a different sacrifice outlet and way to drain the opponent, that can also potentially go infinite with Isilu. Then a Vengeful Blood Witch, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Cruel Celebrant are all very similar, triggering when one of our creatures die. And then in 3-mana enchantment form, we also have the Bastion of Remembrance, which is joined by a 1/1 token, and Funeral Room, which we can later maybe unlock the Awakening Hall to reanimate all our creatures. And then the Sadistic Pilgrim only triggers off other creatures entering or dying, either gaining a life or making the opponent lose 1, but on a 2/2 with Death Touch. And then the Meathook Massacre doubles up as a sweeper effect, but even as just a 2-mana enchantment on the battlefield can make the opponent lose life when our creatures die, while gaining a life whenever an opposing creature dies, so also very powerful. And then we've got our sacrifice outlets, starting with the new Umbral Collar Zealot, letting us surveil 1 whenever we sacrifice an artifact or creature. Bartolome gets a +1/+1 counter. Altar of Dementia as an artifact is a bit harder for the opponent to interact with, lets us mill target player, so that can also double up as a win condition. There's a Warren Soul Trader leaving behind a treasure token at the cost of 1 life. Woestrider lets us scry 1, is joined by a goat token, can also escape it out of the graveyard. There's Yahenni, which can become indestructible if we sacrifice another creature, and whenever opposing creatures die, it also picks up an extra +1/+1 counter. And then there's Ashnod's Altar, making double colorless mana, and finally Yawgmoth, which can put a -1 counter on an opposing creature in addition to drawing a card at the cost of 1 life. And then we've got our enablers, with Vizier being the simplest one, simply negates the first -1 counter, so completely undoes the persist. Then there's Thran Vigil, which gives us a +1 counter as a reward for bringing back a creature from a graveyard. So as long as the creature we're bringing back has more than 1 toughness, we can keep sacrificing it over and over again. Then Solemnity simply negates any counters that are put on players, artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. It also affects the opponent, so we also cannot get any +1/+1 counters, but the important part is we also can't get any -1 counters on our creatures, so we can now infinitely persist them back. And then there's a Luminous Broodmoth. If a creature without flying dies, it returns with a flying counter on it. So we can alternate the flying counter and the -1 persist counter, since we can choose each time. So with the Broodmoth, we can also infinitely go off. And then Cathar's Crusade, of course, doesn't work if we have a Solemnity in play, but this can substitute Solemnity as a way to negate the persist counters, similar to Thran Vigil, but now instead of putting 1 +1 counter on a creature, we can put a +1 counter on each creature we control, so that can also be incredibly powerful. And then our protection section includes Giver of Runes and the recently added Mother of Runes. The original can also target itself as the big advantage. And then a Selfless Spirit can sacrifice itself to make one thing indestructible, whereas Selfless Spirit and Boromir affect our entire team. Boromir having more than 1 toughness is also quite relevant, so we can maybe persist it back to sacrifice it a second time, and also punishes free spells from the opponent. And then Lightning Greaves for Shroud and Haste can let us attack with our commander for 5 right away, so that's also quite nice. And then our miscellaneous section includes some more token makers here with the Voice of Victory, mobilizing when it attacks. Those tokens also get sacrificed, so can potentially trigger some of our drain effects. Bitterbloom Bearer helps us go wide each turn, making an extra fairy token that we can also maybe sacrifice to some of our abilities. And then a Marionette Master is kind of a bigger version of the Marionette Apprentice. So this time we can choose to create 3 1/1 servo tokens, which now when an artifact dies it also drains the opponent. But we can also potentially bring back the Master itself with 3+1 counters, which is a way to undo the persist counter, so we can also infinitely sacrifice it now. And then there's Emptiness, which can also be used as removal or as a way to recur creatures from our own graveyard, and has Evoke, so with Persist out we can also get it back now as a 2/4, so also has pretty neat synergies throughout. And then the mana base is mostly just good mana fixing, fetch lands, which can always get our Surveil land if we don't have the need for an untapped land, can improve our future draw steps, and then a few utility lands, Takenuma to get stuff back from our graveyard, Haiganjo as removal. The Abandoned Air Temple is a pretty good one here, since we can put +1 counters on the entire team, which is another way to kind of mitigate the -1 counters from Persist to reset our creatures, so we can sacrifice them once again. And then Phyrexian Tower can be a nice way to get ahead of mana and give us another sacrifice outlet built into our mana base. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Lonis, blue-green tokens. And so what do we think of our hands? Well, we have our win condition and a free sacrifice outlet. So I'm just missing a way to kind of undo the persist. Got some interaction. Don't know if Lightning Greaves is going to be particularly important against blue-green, but you never know. Alright, I guess we push the elves as opposed to saving it for their commander, which for 4 mana they can still redeploy pretty easily. Opponent goes for Signets. Let's go for Blood Witch. Plains is fine. I'll look out for ramp. Opportunist. Okay, so Soul Trader still probably has the highest upside. Could technically sacrifice the Blood Witch to cast Eirdu next turn. Could be worth it if we draw another Blood Witch-like ability. Now uncounterable Lonis. With a Summon Fenrir to go with it. So they get to ramp and make a clue token. This turn might be for Opportunists, and then Surveil, and then next turn I can play Eirdu. Opportunist is also decent in the face of a Summon Fenrir that's at some point gonna die and draws a card. And a Banter Mole, okay. Their opponent's got a lot of mana, which they can use to sacrifice their clue tokens to draw more cards. But again, not expecting a ton of interaction at least. So we might still be able to assemble one of our infinite combos. Summon attacks, we'll take it. I may as well Surveil. Don't need more lands. Meathook Massacre. Yeah, that seems pretty effective here. So, Massacre for 2. Don't think I need to attack first. We do lose the Blood Witch, but we get a replacement card. Opponent's drawing on the way out. So then I may as well sack the Blood Witch to the Soul Trader to get an extra treasure out of it, as it seems like the massacre is resolving. Alright, and then we still have a fetch in hand. Could play Lightning Greaves to maybe set up a hasty Eirdu next turn. And then Emptiness is a good one too here. Could technically evoke Emptiness to get back the Blood Witch and then sack it while it's in play with the Soul Trader. But that play is going to be a bit more appealing next turn, when we get to re-trigger the Opportunist to draw another card. And get our attack in for 1. We'll have to watch out for a Vine Stalk. And a Thought Monitor is a nice one here, draw 2. So our opponent's not going to run out of cards anytime soon. A Mother of Runes also useful with haste. So play Takenuma, play Eirdu, and give it haste. Hit you for 5. And then we can play Mom, put the Greaves on it, so then Mom can protect our other creatures as well. No need to use Emptiness this turn. It's going to be a bit more exciting once we can persist it as well. So our opponent's digging. And Grazer's fine, can jump. Still 3 cards in hand, 2 clue tokens in play. And now Statuary can also help them cast their bigger spells on the cheap. So we get to untap. And we'll pay the 1 to transform. So what are my options? Can evoke Emptiness, getting back Blood Witch, and then Emptiness persists. Can even sack it to the Soul Trader. We get to draw off Opportunist. That seems like a fine starting point. Do I want to attack with the Emptiness? I guess I can. So making sure we pay double white. Go full control so I can sacrifice it while it's on the battlefields. Okay, so triggers on the stack. Target Blood Witch. Sack to Soul Trader. I'll let the triggers resolve. And we found our Vizier of Remedies. So that's what we needed now to fully combo off. Since Vizier negates the -1 counters we would get. So we can now infinitely sacrifice our creatures. Our opponent knows what's incoming and scoops it up. We have the Blood Witch draining the opponent, and then it doesn't matter which creature we sacrifice, since it's gonna keep on coming back thanks to persists, and again the -1 counter being removed. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Chandra, dressed to kill. So mono-red aggro, can expect a pretty low curve. Our hand's not bad. Mother of Runes is very nice if we can keep it alive on turn 1. And then, yeah, we've got some mana acceleration to maybe get our commander in play. And then a big life linker, especially if we can protect it with Mom, can help swing the game around. And they did not have a 1-mana answer, so mission accomplished. So next turn we can ritual out Eirdu. This turn we'll just sit on our Swords to Plowshares, which was another good pickup. A Ruby Medallion will discount their red spells. Play Eirdu. With protection from red if we need it. They could still have multiple instant speed removal spells to maybe deal with Mother of Runes first. For now, Arcane Signet. Into Ragavan, not super impressive here. Okay, now, what's the situation? Do I transform Eirdu? How close am I to some sort of combo? I do have a sack outlet with a Soul Trader, missing a way to negate the persist counter. So maybe this turn I don't transform, just cast a 3-drop. Since I don't need to Marauder Ragavan. But maybe next turn with a Soul Trader it becomes more appealing to transform. Eventually, Air Temple could help negate the -1 counters, but that's still pretty far away and would also not be infinite. Chandra's Triumph end of turn, interesting. So they're baiting me into protecting the Soul Trader so they can maybe take out Eirdu. Because they could have also targeted Mother of Runes itself, and then I would have been forced to protect itself. So it is a bit of a strange play. There is also the Ragavan factor, I guess. Maybe they just want to clear a path. So, all things considered, I think it is fine to protect Soul Trader. And then if they take out Eirdu, so be it. It's going to be Pinnacle Monk, which can get back the Triumph. And they can still cast it, so now they get to choose whether to clear Soul Trader or Mother of Runes. Goes for Mother of Runes. Still have Swords to Plowshares available, but I don't think I'll need to cast it. Alright, so found another sack outlet. Do I pay the 1? Kinda like the curve of Solemn, and then maybe turn after, transform, play Marauder. So I'll decline. And get a land. And hit you for 5. In a pinch I could still cast Swords by sacking Solemn and getting another treasure. I'll light up the stage, goes digging. Finds a couple of mountains. They still haven't played Chandra, although Eirdu can take it out in one fell swoop. It's going to be Chandra's Regulator, which can double Chandra's abilities. So they probably have a few more Chandras in the deck. And get to untap. Alright, I think now I will transform. And then can go Iron Crag into Marauder. Marauder sacrifices itself and comes back with Persist. And then sacks Solemn. I don't know if I had a window there if I went full control to sacrifice Marauder with Soul Trader while it had 0 power. Possible it doesn't let you. Okay, that was a pretty good sequence. Attack for 8. So even though we're not going infinite, we're still getting great value of all our cards, triggering multiple times. And then, as I've said, I could activate Air Temple, Solomon gets a +1 counter, so now I could once again sacrifice it and persist it back. I see Caldera Breaker. I know this can potentially set up a one-hit KO in Crucius combo decks. So it's gonna exile all mountains from their library, deal that much damage to a creature so they can take out my 5/5, and then when it dies, put all the exiled cards back under their owner's control. So I can potentially exile it with the swords at least, and then it's not gonna trigger on the way out. But that's a lot of mountains. So we'll sacrifice it. Back to the command zone. And there's Chandra.
You know what's great at dispelling darkness?
Plussing for mana.
Give a toast.
Okay. Take my turn. And then can clear the breaker, take out Chandra. Our opponent would also, of course, gain 6 life. But that still seems worthwhile. Opponent won't be able to draw any more mountains, so their deck is now all spells, presumably. Could also recast my commander, to be fair. And then try and close out the game with it next turn. That might be better, honestly. So I can go Talisman into Eirdu. Alright, now Koth is pretty scary, since it can deal damage equal to the number of mountains they control. So that's another answer to our commander. Once again, sacrifice it on the way out to make a treasure. And Breaker attacks. Do I bother exiling it? So with the Regulator, it only affects Chandra Planeswalker specifically. They haven't activated this yet. I think I do exile the Breaker. Or I could wait, take the hit. I mean, I'm at 36, so I can probably afford to. Just to see if they present a different blocker for me to maybe take out. Abrade their own Caldera Breaker. Alright, so now we definitely have to swords, otherwise what happens? Our opponent gets to conjure 4 cards named Volcanic Geyser into their library. And if they ever top deck one, I'm pretty much dead on the spot, since they'll have a million mountains in play. Alright, so maybe our patience paid off. Chandra pluses. Finds Flame Slash. And Fury, wow, those are some good hits. At least Fury they won't be able to cast. Do I sack Solemn? I don't think so. Can still maybe finish off Koth. And a hasty Yahenni isn't bad either. If I play Yahenni, could also transform Ironcrag and equip it. And then I could finish off both Planeswalkers. That's kind of appealing. Okay.
My resolve never dies.
Now I'm further away from recasting Eirdu, but I think we've got enough in hand that we can win without it. Shieldbreaker finds an answer to Everflame. That works. Chandra goes digging. And they hit a colorless land, so it's not all mountains. Alright, now Yawgmoth is a pretty decent answer to the Shield Breaker. So we can go Yawgmoth. If I play Woestrider, I can sack the Goat. Or I can use Haruspex, sack Solemn. Kinda like the idea of using Temple to maybe get another +1 counter on Solemn in the future. So Goat is gone. And then we can finish off Chandra once again.
Come on, Chandra. I know you can.
And maybe next turn activating Temple could be good enough. Alright, Flamecaller is a pseudo board wipe here. 4 damage to each creature.
If you're impressed now,
Yeah, that was about as good a top deck as you can get. Also copied with the Regulator, so they could have potentially kept Chandra alive. But, yeah, I can save Yahenni at least. So, what's my preferred sequencing? Yeah, Yahenni doesn't pick up any counters from my creatures dying. So instead I can use Yawgmoth to sacrifice Solemn. And draw a couple cards. Yeah, I guess sacking the creature to itself doesn't draw a card there. But that's alright, so we still have a Yahenni. Time to maybe escape Woestrider. Or we can just play a couple 3s. How close am I to replaying Eirdu? 7, 8, and 9. Yeah, I guess I can replay it right now. Yeah, maybe that's still preferred. Get a Plains, play it. Hit for 3. So had they just, let's say, used a -2 on Chandra, I still would have been able to finish it off with Yahenni. Says no to a Fiery Emancipation. Not good enough. And Unholy Heat, Yahenni. Alright, that's gone. Get to untap. Transform Eirdu. So now if I sack Boromir, it will return with Persist, so we can protect Isilu going forward. And yeah, probably time for a Woestrider as well. Get rid of some non-creature spells. Play Boromir. And yeah, I don't think our opponent's surviving this one. So yeah, it was a hard-fought battle. Some nice back and forth. We're very close to potentially assembling an infinite combo here as well, just missing a way to maybe drain the opponent when our creatures die. The Air Temple can also undo the persist counter to keep sacking Boromir over and over, although that's of course limited to once per turn. Slight missequence on the Yawgmoth to draw an extra card maybe. But yeah, there we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Tourach, mono black, discard. So it's gonna be tough to keep my cards in hand. Giver of Runes is probably gonna eat a removal spell. And then, yeah, I mean, at least my cards are cheap, so I can deploy them early. Finding some ramp cards would have been useful, but then again, our opponent's also likely to have some discard effects. I do need to get Godless Shrine if I want to play Bearer next turn. Opponent's got the Fatal Push. Alright, Vizier could be nice. So now Apprentice versus Bitterbloom Bearer. I guess we can flash in the Bearer end of turn. Looks like they have another 1 mana answer, maybe a Cut Down. Or a Dismember. That's too bad. Okay, next up. Our opponent's still 2 turns away from making me discard 2 at random, but they could have a different discard effect. So which effect is more important? I mean, all 3 of these plus a transformed Eirdu could combo off, so I kind of like all of them. Which is more replaceable, and again our opponent could also just have spot removal, so there's no clear answer. I think I start with Apprentice, and then hopefully next turn we can play out our other creatures. Alright, Phyrexian Arena will draw the opponent more cards, and I got my wish. Now I just gotta hope they don't have a board wipe. And then Eirdu also needs to resolve and then survive for a turn, so still a lot of conditions need to be met. But at least we don't care too much about Tourach right now. Gets our Marauder. Alright, opponent's just gonna play a talent instead of kicking it, makes sense. I think I am down to sack the Servo token here just to surveil and hopefully find a land so I can cast Eirdu. Solitude. Well, opponent does have protection from white, so this is not going to work, and we're also mana short of casting it. Found the land, so we're still on track to combo next turn. No attacks. Just gotta cross our fingers that they have a bunch of discard effects and not some spot removal. Alright, Heartless Act takes care of Eirdu. Can still surveil on the way out at least. And look for more mana sources. Plains will do. But yeah, the more time passes, the more answers our opponent can draw into. And I'm still 2 turns away from potentially recasting this. So don't love my chances. I also need every single creature to survive. Night's Whisper, draw more. They are down to 12, so maybe there's a world where we can still get in enough damage. And Liliana probably makes me sacrifice here. So what makes more sense? Probably get rid of the Vizier, and then at least we still get to drain with the Apprentice. And the protection from white was not going to attack past Tourach. Well, I can cast Eirdu. I could give up on Apprentice to get rid of Liliana, but at this point we probably don't care enough. Is this a snuff out? Has to be. Yeah, that's rough. Our opponent is now down to 6. And Cathar's Crusade. Yeah, I mean, could have been useful earlier, now it's probably not gonna cut it. Would be another way to go infinite with Eirdu, now that we lost the Vizier. But I would rather find a way to drain the opponent, maybe. If Zealot attacks face, they trade for Tourach, we drain for 1. I don't think that benefits me necessarily. Need to find some random token maker, maybe. Not that we have many. Finding Marionette Master, I guess, would do it, the 6 mana version. Now Ravenman is fine. And Rankle. Rankle can make us sacrifice stuff. So then... lose a Zealot. Keep the Apprentice. Although if I top deck specifically Marionette Master, having the Zealot in play would be useful. I think I sank the Zealot still. Put them to 4. And draw Blood Artist. Okay. Now if Apprentice attacks, again they can block with Tourach. I would still only drain for 1. But now if they minus Liliana, I sack Apprentice. And then, yeah, opponent's on a pretty fast clock. Prefer Blood Artist since it also triggers off opposing creatures dying. So Rankle, each player sacks a creature, is not quite as appealing now. Yeah, that's gonna be a mistake. 2 Blood Artist triggers with our opponent at 2. And we got there, so not quite in the way I envisioned, but I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Ultima, colorless ramp. What do we think of our hands? We've got the Vizier, Marionette Apprentice. So, yeah, we're very close to comboing off since Spirit can function as a sack outlet. So, especially if we can get disconnections in play early, we could be in business. And then I expect Loran to be effective against a colorless deck. They'll have plenty of artifacts we can destroy. So we'll get our Surveil lands, just looking for more mana. Flooded Strand will do. For now, Apprentice. Turn to Cold Steel Heart. I'll wait for a bigger artifact for Loran and get the connections going. And yeah, Power Stone's definitely worth taking out. I'll choose every mode here. Our life total's not under a ton of pressure. Could even go Eirdu into Loran, which is a dream. And then I can keep going. Destroy your Power Stone. Play Vizier. And then next turn with Selfless Spirit, we should have lethal. Opponent taps out for Ultima. Alright, so gotta pay the mana to transform. Brute Moth, similar to Vizier, can also help us go infinite. So technically missing a sacrifice outlet, but Selfless Spirits with Vizier is good enough. And yeah, opponent knows we have infinite here, sack Spirit, trigger both Pilgrim and the Marionette Apprentice, rinse and repeat, and there we go. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Hei Bai, 5-color shrines. What do we think of our hand? We have 2 sack outlets. No way to kind of offset the persist, no ramp. Don't think this is quite gonna cut it. This one doesn't do it either. Don't really need a ton of protection in this matchup. Alright, this one's got Vizier. to negate the persist. Lotho can maybe help us ramp. What do we get rid of is the question. Fatal Push can be decent against Hei Bai if they're on a build with a bunch of mana elves, but it's not a guarantee. Bitter Bloom Bearer, I guess, is not strictly necessary here. So I'll keep the Fatal Push, can always pitch it to Grief. Can maybe Grief next turn after playing Lotho. Opponent on Exploration. Yeah, I guess we'll Grief here. Doesn't seem like Fatal Push is gonna be amazing. Alright, opponent has some pretty good ones. Although no lands left, so at least Exploration has kind of expired. So yeah, kind of a speculative hand, all things considered. They need double white for Parting Gust, so not gonna worry about it. Sanctum I don't care about. Life's Origin can be scary. Soul Herder, probably the scariest if they get it going with Hei Bai. They found a red mana. Get to keep making treasure here at least. So I'm just a sacrifice outlet away from being able to sacrifice my creatures infinitely. And then I would need a way to drain the opponent when a creature dies to deal infinite damage. Alright, they drew 2 lines in a row to play Hei Bai. And a Spirit Oasis to draw. I can play Eirdu at least. And no attacks. We'll keep the protection available, I think. Life's Origin is next. Can draw off Oasis twice. And they found white mana. 2 white sources, in fact. Well, our opponent drew incredibly well after keeping a 2-lander. Selfless Savior means I'm now just a drain effect away from comboing off. Because with a Vizier, I can infinitely sacrifice the Selfless Savior. So, yeah, with the right top deck we could get there. And give her protects from Parting Gusts. This looks like Golos. I'm getting a command tower. So next turn they'll have black mana available. Yeah, I mean I can block with the Savior, sacrifice it, and bring it back. Could have also taken out Hei Bai by double blocking and making both creatures indestructible. But maybe we prefer Hei Bai in play at this point. Alright, can we top deck a Drain effect? We sure can, Sephiroth. So I think we actually got there. With Giver, I don't need to worry about any interaction. Sephiroth can sack Lotho. Immediately comes back thanks to Persist, and thanks to Vizier there's no -1 counter. And we get to now sack Selfless Savior repeatedly. So we have that built-in sacrifice outlet. Opponent's got a response. Parting Gusts, and we say no. And our opponent explodes. Yeah, that's infinite damage. We'll get to transform Sephiroth in the process. Can still get an attack in the air. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Svella, a red-green ramp. My hand is not particularly exciting in this matchup. I don't expect a ton of interaction, so I just want to maybe try and set up my infinite life drain as quickly as possible. This hand has a Reaper for card draw, although it doesn't trigger off tokens dying. Funeral Room has our win condition, but I'm missing a sack outlet, and I'm missing a way to kind of mitigate the persist -1 counter. So I'll take my mulligan. This hand's a little bit better. Sentinel could matter. I'll get Godless Shrine, so we also have double black. Power Stone for ramp, have a bit of interaction. And then still looking for an infinite sack outlet. Sephiroth is still good, but it's not infinite. But I'll definitely still take it here. Opponent with turn 2 Utopia Sprawl, so they had to delay it because of Sentinel, perhaps. More card draw. Still gonna prioritize Power Stone to get our commander in play. And then with a Convoke, I could still cast a 3-drop afterwards. Boseiju played as a land instead of maybe blowing up the Power Stone. And a Cultivator can maybe find another land. Okay. Stick to the plan. And then we can flash this in at instant speed thanks to Convoke. And then Sephiroth with Relax in play can draw 2 cards. And Defense the Heart, wow. Okay, that punishes me for controlling 3 or more creatures. Yeah, that's rough. So I don't really have a way to stop this. So then I may as well play more stuff out anyways. And hope we can somehow beat whatever they search up. A Lightning Greaves for haste. So do I transform? I don't have to, but I think it's worth it. Since we'll get a bunch of extra death triggers this way. So I can play Sephiroth, sack the Sentinel. Draws into Fatal Push. Sentinel persists back, immediately dying again. Find a Bastion. So Sephiroth needs 4 creatures to have died. So if I Lightning Greaves, give Sephiroth haste. Can also Fatal Push the Cultivator. Trigger Sephiroth, attack. Sack this one. Sephiroth will transform. Bones at 4. So that feels pretty powerful. And we'll see if defense can beat us regardless. Still have a Chupacabra in hand. Air Temple to maybe reset the -1 counter. Because yeah, I could have sacrificed Blood Witch, which persists back but immediately dies. But then, yeah, if I push my own Accursed, it would come back with a -1 counter, so I don't think I would have been able to stop defense. But yeah, opponent's not having an easy time choosing what to search up. So that should be a good sign for us. Whatever creature they find, they put on the battlefield, they're not casting it. Alright, Itali and Vorinclex, yeah, that's a good pair. Into Titan of Industry, wow. Blows up the boots. Find Cutthroat. And they still have 1,000,000 mana thanks to Vorinclex. Chupacabra can clear the Titan. Although Volborn Tyrant's gonna gain them more life. And there's Svella. Well, that was quite a turn. I will not transform back. But I will Chupacabra answer Titan. And yeah, opponent knows the writings on the wall here. I get to clear Titan, attack, and then I can sacrifice a bunch of stuff to Sephiroth as well to further drain the opponent with Blood Witch and with a Sephiroth emblem. And then we should be able to get enough damage in as is. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Obyra, blue-black, fairies. My hand seems fine, especially Voice of Victory can punish someone trying to play cards at instant speed. And there's not too many one-mana counter spells out there that can stop it. So yeah, I'll play the Voice over Terminus while we can ensure it resolves. And hope they don't have removal for it. Opponent reconsiders, passes, but yeah, now they're locked out of casting spells, which they may not have realized yet. So what do we like? Terminus can get me closer to casting Eirdu, especially if I surveil into another land. So that might be preferable over playing some of these 3-drops. Opponent now realizing that they're unable to cast their spells. Haruspex says non-token, same with the Reaper, so they don't combo with a Voice. Bastion does, so could have drained them for 2. And now the Tome Skimmer also shut down by Voice of Victory. So yeah, this card's doing a number on them right now. Look for land. Found it. Yeah, I guess Eirdu is fine here. Can no longer attack profitably, but I can actually still convoke a creature, so that's pretty nice. Let's go with a Midnight Reaper. Talion is next. Names 2. So this does have 2 toughness. So what I don't have right now is a sacrifice outlet or a way to undo the persist in a way. So I'm not in a hurry. For now, play Bastion, which doesn't trigger Talion. Blood Artist does. But it may still be worth deploying. What happens if I morph this face down as a 2/2? Yeah, I guess it still triggers Talion, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think I still just go for it anyway. Get my stuff in play. And then next turn I can look into transforming Eirdu and maybe setting up some attacks. Actually wouldn't mind Freebooter dying and triggering Haruspex and Midnight Reaper. Alright, Una's Blackguard into Obyra. So now we can transform and set up some attacks. Can get pretty aggressive here. Something along these lines. Maybe don't want all my creatures to end up with -1 counters right away. But then again, this is probably the turn to get value. Does he silo attack? Pretty happy to keep that one on defense. Alright, let's see what happens. Now if Voice dies, there might be a very brief moment where our opponent can play spells at instant speed. but for only 1 mana. So now we get a whole bunch of triggers. And find Lotho. Don't know if that one is worth casting when they get an extra Talion trigger. So I'll just stay put, but yeah, opponent's just too far behind. End of turn, 2 tokens also go away, triggering Bastion and Blood Artist, and our opponent's pretty close to dead. So we got to see this black-white sacrifice deck in action, and yeah, it does take a bit of setup to get our commander in play and then transform it, so especially against decks with a lot of removal, we're gonna struggle to get our combos online, but if we do manage to get Isilu in play, the deck can still get a lot of value out of persisting its various creatures, even if we're not necessarily going infinite right away, but then we do have the hope of eventually assembling all the different combo pieces to just win the game outright, so it is nice that we have the hope of at some point still being able to win the game, even if things may look desperate at times. So yeah, overall, pretty happy with how this deck turned out, but there are more efficient sacrifice commanders out there if you're looking for something a bit more competitive. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.